Imagine a United States that is no longer united. A new line is drawn right down the middle of the country. This line follows the path of the mighty Mississippi River. Everything to the east becomes a new nation. It is called the United States of Atlantic America, or USAA. Everything to the west becomes another new nation. It is named the United Republic of Pacifica, or URP. This simple act of division would change everything we know about America. The familiar map of 50 states would be torn in two, creating a reality that is hard to picture today. This is not just a political idea. It would reshape the daily lives of millions of people. This new border would be the longest international boundary in the world. And it would stretch for thousands of miles from the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico all the way up to the Great Lakes near Canada. Suddenly, a simple drive from Memphis, Tennessee to West Memphis, Arkansas would become an international trip. You would need a passport. You would need to go through customs. This would not be a quick or easy process. The river that once connected the heartland of the nation would now be a formidable barrier, a symbol of separation instead of a channel of commerce and unity. The very geography that defined the nation's growth would now define its fracture. To manage this new border, massive changes would be needed. Hundreds of new border crossings would have to be built. These would not just be simple toll booths. They would be large complexes with agents, security scanners, and long lines of cars and trucks waiting to be inspected. Fences and walls might be constructed along long stretches of the river. Patrol boats would constantly move up and down the waterway. This would all cost an enormous amount of money. It would also create a feeling of tension and division that did not exist before. The free movement people once took for granted would be gone, replaced by strict rules and constant surveillance. For people living near the Mississippi, daily life would be turned upside down. Families could be split between two different countries. A person might live in the USAA but work in the URP, and their daily commute would become a complicated international journey. Friends who once lived just a few miles apart would now be foreigners to each other. The river cities that grew up as sister communities would now be border towns facing each other across a new international divide. The sense of a shared community built over generations would be shattered. Life would become more complicated, more expensive, and filled with new kinds of uncertainty. The economic impact of this split would be immense. The United States of Atlantic America would hold on to some of the country's biggest financial centers. New York City, with Wall Street and its powerful banks, would be in the USAA. So would other major economic hubs like Boston and Atlanta. And this would give the Eastern nation a strong foundation in finance, insurance, and international trade. However, it would lose direct access to the vast agricultural and technological resource of the West. The Eastern economy would need to find new ways to feed its people and power its industries, creating a significant and immediate challenge for its leaders and citizens. On the other side of the river, the United Republic of Pacifica would have its own set of economic strengths. It would control the rich farmlands of the Great Plains, which produce much of the nation's food. This region is often called America's breadbasket for a reason. Pacifica would also hold the world-famous technology hub of Silicon Valley in California. This would make the Western nation a leader in innovation, software, and digital technology. It would also possess vast natural resources, including oil and minerals. However, it would be cut off from the established financial markets of the East Coast, forcing it to build a new economic system from the ground up. Trade between the two new nations would become very complicated. Before the split, goods moved freely across the country. After the split, the USAA and the URP would likely impose tariffs or taxes on each other's products. A car made in a factory in Michigan, now part of the USAA, would become more expensive to buy in California, which is in the URP. Food grown in Pacifica's farmlands would cost more for people living in the USAA. This could lead to trade wars, where both sides keep raising taxes, hurting businesses and consumers in both nations. The integrated supply chain that powered the American economy would be broken, causing widespread disruption. This economic competition could be very damaging. Businesses that rely on a national market would have to choose a side or try to operate in two different countries with different laws and currencies. The cost of doing business would skyrocket. Some companies might go bankrupt. Regular people would feel the effects through higher prices for everyday goods and fewer job opportunities. The once mighty American economy would be replaced by two smaller competing economies. Each would be weaker and more vulnerable than the unified economy that preceded them. The prosperity that many Americans had known would be seriously threatened. The United States military is currently the most powerful in the world. A split down the Mississippi would change that overnight. Every branch of the armed forces, the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Space Force, would have to be divided. This would be an incredibly complex and painful process. Who gets the aircraft carriers? How are the nuclear weapons divided? Where do soldiers, sailors, and pilots declare their allegiance? These are not easy questions to answer. The result would be two separate, smaller, and significantly weaker military forces. Neither the USAA nor the URP would have the same global reach or power as the original United States. This division of military power would create new dangers for both new nations. Each country would have a long new border to defend against the other. This could lead to a permanent state of military tension, with soldiers and weapons stationed along the Mississippi River. There might be disagreements over who controls the river itself. This could easily spark a conflict between the two new neighbors. Furthermore, other countries around the world might see this division as an opportunity. Rivals of the old United States could try to take advantage of the chaos, creating new security threats for both the USAA and the URP on the world stage. The global balance of power would be completely rearranged. For decades, the United States has played a central role in international security. A split America would mean a world without its dominant superpower. This could create a power vacuum, a void that other countries like China or Russia might try to fill. Alliances that have kept the peace for years, like NATO, would be thrown into confusion. Allies who have depended on American military protection would suddenly feel vulnerable. The world could become a much more unstable and dangerous place without a strong, unified United States to help maintain order. The nuclear arsenal presents a particularly terrifying problem. Dividing thousands of nuclear weapons would be a nightmare scenario. Both new nations would want a nuclear deterrent, but the process of separating the warheads, missiles, and submarines would be filled with risk. An argument over these weapons could lead to a catastrophic conflict. The entire world would watch with extreme anxiety, as the slightest misstep could have devastating consequences. The once unified command and control system that kept these weapons safe would be gone, replaced by two new untested systems, increasing the risk of an accidental or intentional nuclear launch. The split would do more than just change borders and economies. It would formalize the deep cultural and political divisions that already exist in the country. Often people talk about red states and blue states to describe different political beliefs. This split would turn that abstract idea into a hard reality. The United States of Atlantic America might become a nation that is more politically liberal or left-leaning. The United Republic of Pacifica, on the other hand, could become a nation that is more politically conservative or right-leaning. This would create two very different societies with different laws and values. This stark division would likely lead to a great migration. Millions of people might choose to move. A liberal-minded family living in Texas, now part of the URP, might decide to pack up and move to the USAA. A conservative business owner in Illinois, now in the USAA, might feel more at home in the URP. This mass movement of people would be one of the largest in modern history. It would cause huge disruptions. Cities would have to deal with a sudden influx of new residents while other towns might be left nearly empty. This would strain housing, schools, and social services everywhere. For the people who choose to stay, life would feel very different. They might find themselves living in a country where their personal beliefs are now in the minority. A person's identity would be profoundly affected. Are they still American, or are they now Atlantic American or Pacifican? The shared history and symbols that once united everyone, from the flag to the national anthem, would now be contested. The feeling of belonging to one large, diverse nation would be lost. It would be replaced by a narrower sense of national identity, defined more by political agreement than by a shared past. Ultimately, the split would be a human tragedy. It would break apart families, friendships, and communities. The idea of the American dream, the belief that anyone can succeed through hard work, could be shattered. The division would create two weaker nations, locked in competition and suspicion. While the idea of splitting the country might appeal to some who are frustrated with political division, the reality would be incredibly difficult and painful. It would likely create more problems than it solves, leaving everyone on both sides of the river in a more divided and uncertain world. The great experiment of the United States would have come to a sad and bitter end.